Well, on Wednesday mornings, it's a time when we talk about the local food scene, and we get to talk with people who are growing food, raising food, and people who have new ideas about local food, how to extend our season, and how to grow a local food economy. Central Lakes College in Brainerd is hosting an indoor food production workshop next Friday, the 11th of December. The workshop will cover the basics of growing food indoors and include a tour of the Sustainable Greenhouse Project at the college, where they have aquaculture and hydroponic systems. Jeff Dirks is leading the workshop, and he teaches horticulture at Central Lake College. He joins us now to tell us more about the workshop and the greenhouses. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning.
Thanks for being with us. Tell us about those greenhouses at Central Lakes College.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for having me on. And we are in Brainerd, as you mentioned. We are a part of the horticulture program here, and we have a sustainable greenhouse production program. And as part of that, we have about 5,000 square feet. We have 2 different greenhouses on campus here, and we raise a variety of crops, including some of the traditional things like poinsettias and things for Christmas and different ornamental crops, but we're also getting heavily into the indoor food production, and we are raising a variety of vegetables primarily in several different systems of hydroponics and aquaponics that we're just really enjoying doing, and we thought we would share that information with others, and so now we're putting together a workshop, as you mentioned, that can introduce the public to those systems.
Well, tell us about the what is hydroponics, and what are these aquaculture systems? What are they?
Right. It is interesting because sometimes I even look up online and they'll have different definitions for them, but I'll try to explain it a little bit. When we talk about hydroponics, rather than growing plants in soil, we use water as a medium for bringing them all the nutrients that they need. And so they aren't growing in any kind of a soil. They're just growing in water, which is kind of fascinating for people because we assume that we would need soil to grow healthy plants. But in a lot of ways, we actually have more control when we're growing them in water because we can provide nutrients in a real precise manner that the plants need at any stage of their growth. And so hydroponics comes up with different systems that are, you may hang a plant above water so that their roots will grow into the water, or they may be growing in some sort of a gravel or something that doesn't really provide any nutrition but just provides a place for the roots to grow, and then the nutrients are flushed into the system with water and then back out again. And so it's really kind of an intriguing system, and we have real precision in the way that we grow them. And we find that we use actually less water and less nutrients because all of those waters are recycled, and so we don't have any waste.
How do you keep them warm in the wintertime?
Well, that's one of the key things, of course. And with when we refer to indoor food production, we would typically be referring to either a greenhouse that would actually have heat in it. And so it is one of the most expensive parts of producing food indoors in Minnesota is providing heat because, of course, a greenhouse does not have great insulation. And so then we have to have pretty good furnaces in there that will actually keep the plants at the temperature that they're needed to be. One of the reasons that we call it an indoor food production as opposed to just greenhouse is because we're getting technology now where people are actually starting to grow plants in rooms, in houses, or even in old warehouses and that type of thing. And what we're doing then is providing artificial light, and that we do that now a lot of times with LED lighting, which runs a lot cheaper, and we're actually finding that we can provide light inside a building cheaper than we can heat a greenhouse and have the light available. So right now we're kind of seeing some transitions between the two, but I think we'll continue to see plants grown in greenhouses, but we're also seeing plants grown in buildings with just big rooms with water and hydroponics and that kind of thing, but with all of the light coming from artificial sources.
Well, that's fascinating.
It really is fascinating, yes. And without the technology that we have now, we haven't been able to do that in a profitable way. But now we're seeing that with LED lights are a little more expensive to purchase, but they run very cheap. And so the electricity that we use is a lot less. And so that's where we're starting to see people take advantage of that and actually be able to produce things indoors.
Hi, Jeff. This is Peggy. I'm joining in. Could you tell us a little bit more about aquaponics?
Sure. So hydroponics, again, is growing plants in water. And then the aquaculture would be the growing of fish in commercial settings like in tanks or even in outdoor ponds. And so aquaculture, if we combine the fish and use the fish water to feed the plants, we would take the aqua from aquaculture and the ponics from hydroponics and call it aquaponics. And so that's kind of a fascinating thing, because then what we do is, and we have this at the school here, we have large 500-gallon tanks of fish growing, primarily tilapia, and then we feed the fish, and the fish waste provides the nutrition for the plants. And so we circulate the water from the fish tanks through the water that feeds the plants, and the plants actually, the roots purify that water, and then we can send it back to the fish, and the fish can live in that water again. Now, that sounds really simple, but there's several steps in between there where there's different processes that we use to change the water into non-harmful elements that the plants can actually use. But that's the essence of it. And so aquaponics is using fish and plants, and we can actually raise the fish to a size that we can market the fish, and we can raise the plants to a size that we can market the plants. So it's pretty fascinating.
We are talking to Jeff Dirks. He is a horticulture instructor at Central Lakes College in Brainerd. Jeff, tell us about your students and the role that these greenhouses play in your curriculum.
Well, as a technical program, all the technical programs, of course, we think that hands-on experiential learning is a very important part of that. So we could be in a classroom and talk about the greenhouses, but of course that doesn't give them the real-life application. And so all of our greenhouse classes and all of our horticulture classes have a lab component. So this morning we'll meet at 8 o'clock, and we will talk about some different processes that we do in the greenhouse. And then we walk down to the greenhouses, which is maybe a couple hundred yards away from the main building, and we spend an hour or two in there caring for all of these different plants. And so each student will have a bench or a particular system that they are in charge of, and they need to determine, how much water the plants need, how much food the fish need, and how all of that fits together. And then they see what's successful and failures. And we've talked a lot about, I was mentioning with one of the instructors this morning that we don't always have successes, but we almost learn more from some of our failures. In other words, if a crop doesn't turn out quite the way we wanted it to, what nutrient was it missing, or what other possibly, or maybe a pest got in trouble with, maybe a plant got in trouble with the pest, and so how do you manage the pest? And so it's a very, very good application of what they learn in class.
Are these systems being used more and more out in this is the real world, but in more industrial or food production uses?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons we'd like to have the workshop, because we'd like to the workshop is for people that may not know anything about it, or for people who actually have a system set up, maybe need more information. It really is kind of technical, and so there's a lot of things to pay attention to. So sometimes people get into it and they find out that they need to know more about it. But it's also something that people can use miscellaneous containers and things from home. But having said that, there are some big commercial operations in Minnesota now with acres of greenhouses that they produce primarily things that are real big sellers like lettuce and tomatoes and herbs and things like that in greenhouses primarily, but there's a couple of operations in St. Paul that are taking advantage of old brewery buildings and putting aquaponics indoors and growing them under lights. And so I think we're seeing the beginning of a very big trend toward indoor production of food.
Tell us what your workshop is going to cover next Friday.
Sure. So we consider this kind of an introductory workshop. This time we're going to have another advanced workshop in February. We're going to talk about the aquaponics and hydroponics systems and what makes one better than another. We're going to be talking about heating and cooling because, again, heating is a very important part of it because we spend a lot of money in Minnesota for heat, and there's good and bad ways to heat the greenhouses or other buildings. Even talk a little bit about the fresh food movement and how that affects jobs in America and what the trends are and what are people looking for in their food. And so some of those kinds of things like what should I grow if I decide to start something like this? We have one that's kind of cute. It's a food safety thing that basically says how to not kill your customers with aquaponics. So there's always a food safety issue anytime you're working with plants and animals, and we want to make sure that the product is able to get to the market in a safe manner that doesn't have any, diseases or anything with it. And then pests are a really big thing in growing indoors, and so we have a variety of insects particularly and some diseases that can cause a lot of problems on the plants, so we'll be talking about pests as well. And then we will be giving some tours of the greenhouses so that people can see. We have quite a few different systems in the greenhouse, so they're able to see systems that are up and running and how they might function.
Wow. It sounds like a lot to digest in one day. And you say there's a follow-up workshop in February, right?
Yes, there is. And you're right, it's a lot to digest. And so the first one will be a lot of information that they'll have to take home and kind of work through, and then we can have the follow-up. And I should just say that next year we are actually going to provide a class 100% on aquaponics. And so that'll be a part of our curriculum. And we think that that's going to be moving toward maybe even a program here that would teach and train people to have kind of an aquaponics training center here. So there's lots of learning that needs to be done, and everyone's still learning, and lots of people are trying different methods and trying to find out what works best. But there definitely are certain methods that do work better for commercial and other systems that work better for the homeowner. Uh-huh. And so we've identified those, and that'll be part of that workshop to share that with people.
Well, Jeff, this sounds very exciting, and thank you so much for talking with us about this morning.
You're welcome.
All right.
Could I mention one last thing?
Yes.
Just if they're interested in learning more about the workshop, we just have an email address that's just indoorfood at clcmn.edu. And if anyone would like to contact us, that would be a great email address to send us a message and just say, hey, I heard about it. Can you give me more information?
All right. And we'll have that here, too. If you didn't have a paper and pencil to write that down, you can always call us and we can relay that information to you. Thank you very much, Jeff.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. Jeff Dirks is a horticulture instructor at Central Lakes College in Brainerd. He's leading the indoor food production workshop at the college on Friday, December 11th from 9 a.m. to 4:30. And if you'd like more information, our phone number is 800-662-5799. It's the morning show on Northern Community Radio.